You know, the first step for the home buying process is honestly different for everybody. Really, it's making the decision that you're going to buy a house. The order at which you proceed after you decide you want to buy a house is really the same. It's just that there's a lot of mental blocks. And the biggest one is pre-approval for a mortgage. You know, you got to go to the bank. You got to reveal yourself completely. You got to show them your third grade report card. You got to show them your, all your pay stubs, your taxes for like the last 2 years. First, do I even know where my taxes are for the last 2 years? You got to dig that up. It's a very revealing process. It's so simple, but it's not easy. And that's the barrier I think a lot of people run into when they're like, I want to buy a house. It's like, oh, but the bank, I got to get through this pre-approval process. They're going to ask for all this information. I don't have it all. I don't know where it all is. And that's where a lot of people get stopped, is right there. It depends. I mean, how long it takes to buy a home really depends on how quickly you can get yourself through the pre-approval process. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, you get your pre-approval done in a day. It takes as long as it takes to find the house you want. And in a market like this, where inventory is very scarce, there isn't a lot to look at, that could take the longest after pre-approval. After you pick out the house you want, after you already know what you're going to buy, that's a 30 to 45, maybe a 60-day process. But, there's a lot of steps that come before even, shopping. That can take the longest. Yeah, so, the pre-approval process is basically getting your credit pulled. Banker's going to look at your debt-to-income ratio. Now, there's a difference between a pre-qualification and a pre-approval. What you really want to do is you want to do the pain first. Take the pain out of the equation early on. I think Mark Twain said if you start the day off by eating a live frog, the rest of the day will be a breeze. Get the actual pre-approval letter. The pre-approval versus the pre-qual means they verified everything. They went through, they got your pay stubs, they looked at them, they verified them, they got through all your bills, they made sure your debt to income is right. That makes the rest of this too easy. Good question. So what is a seller's market? A seller's market means that there is a supply-demand favoring the seller. And there's not a lot to be had. So imagine you were at a bar and there was 75 women and one man. And the man's the seller. That's a seller's market. I could get down and literally translate it. What it really means is an absorption rate, and it's based on months of inventory. So say we have a market where we're selling 2 houses a week, so like 8 houses a month. If there's 8 houses active right now, there's 8 houses on the market, and we continue to sell 8 houses a month, we have 1 month's supply. If there was 24 houses on the month and we were selling 8 houses a month, there's 3 months supply. So quite literally, 1 to 3 months of supply is a seller's market. If there's 3 to 6 months of supply, so if there was 48 houses on the market, we're selling 8 houses a month, that's 6 months supply. That's a balanced market. Anything over 6 months of supply on the market is a buyer's market. Now, what's a buyer's market? A buyer's market is when there's a lot of supply on the market. So buyers can choose from a lot. Let's say we were selling 8 houses a month and there was 80 houses available to be seen by that buyer. So like not just 80 houses on the market, but 80 ranches in Brighton. If we had 80 ranches in Brighton on the market and we were only selling about 8 a month, there'd be 10 months supply on the market. That'd be a buyer's market because they have a ton to choose from. Well, that's a good question. So how much would you have to pay a real estate agent for help to buy a house? The way that our system is set up, a buyer almost never pays their realtor. The seller pays their realtor, and then their realtor, then they'll call the listing agent, all right? So then the listing agent pays the buyer's agent to do their job, to show you the houses, and then the listing agent then pays the buyer's agent. Okay, what kind of credit score do you need to buy a home? It's a really good question, and there's no real simple answer to it. It's could be a 580, but it depends what kind of 580 you have. Do you have a 580 because you had an illness and your credit score dropped, but you were usually fine all the rest of the time, but you had that one period of time that was an illness, and it can be proved that it was an isolated incident? 580 is going to get you done. 620 is what a lot of banks will tell you, but if you ask 10 banks the exact same question, you'll get 10 absolutely unique answers. And that's why you really need to have an agent who knows which banks are going to say what, because if I hear a client's story, like, I'm going to be able to tell them, okay, this bank system is going to work for you, this one won't, because I've just seen the movie so many times, you know? So how much do you need for a down payment to buy a house? It could be zero. It depends where that house is located. If you're buying in a rural area that qualifies for USDA mortgage, you could literally finance 100% of it. If you're cool with living where USDA will approve a loan, you can get out of pocket with $0. You can bring literally $100 to closing. Now, if you do an FHA mortgage, that's going to be 3.5% down, but that's not all there is to the closing costs either. Like, say it's a $100,000 house, 3.5% down, $3,500. You're still going to have to pay for a lawyer, a home inspection, a couple other fees in there. It's going to be more like, figure 9 to 10% of your selling price. So if you buy a $100,000 house, you're going to be probably, even if you get seller concessions, you're going to be coming out of pocket with $8,000, $9,000, $10,000.
What's the other type of mortgage?
Conventional, VA. So conventional is a little bit more. Conventional, you're going to need 5% down, so you're going to need $5,000 down payment on the $100,000 house, but the $100,000 house probably has a $4,000 or $5,000 tax bill, so you're going to need the first year taxes up front too. That's really the biggest closing cost, is your first year of taxes. That's a good question. How many homes should you view before you buy a house? As many as it takes. You know, you asked me earlier, what's the first step in buying a house? The first step is deciding you're going to buy a house. Once you've done that, there isn't a minimum amount of houses you have to go look at before you've done enough. If you walk into a house and you like that first house and you don't make an offer on it, you may regret that choice later. If you're real sure about it and it's the first house you've seen, buy it. There's a lot of things that can happen after you make that first offer and get it accepted that could make it so you're not stuck in that deal if it ends up not being the right thing for you. But don't feel like there's a minimum amount of homes that you got to look at before you did enough. If you go look at that first house, it ends up feeling the right thing, then go with the feeling.